How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our virtual machine deep dive, where we're basically going to go through, I'm going to walk you through all the individual components and steps that you need to have ready in order to deploy a virtual machine. It's pretty straightforward stuff for the most part. You just have to understand what it basically is doing. And a high-level expose, if you will, on a virtual machine is it's basically just a container that you map attributes to, like your RAM, CPU, storage, and so on. Other capabilities like USB and graphics adapters and things like that. And they all come together, and the ISO file, which is going to be your install file, your boot file, all that type of stuff, all that is going to be using the resources that you allocate. So CPU, RAM, storage, etc. No different than if you were to take a new laptop that you went out and bought, or a new PC that you went out and bought, and you install a new operating system on it. Same logic applies. The difference is you physically can't touch a virtual machine, right? It's a software container, which means that you just go through and you create it. There's a little pop-up that shows up. I'll show you that here in just a minute in order to walk you through the installation process. The install is actually very straightforward. You just have to know what's going on behind the scenes and things like that. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to actually go through the Windows 10 portion of the install inside of the vSphere client, which is what you're looking at right now. And then I'm also going to show you how to do this inside of the web client. I'm going to do them one after another instead of two different videos, and then we'll go ahead and get the rest of the config done once the installs are completed in another video. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into what we're going to be taking a look at and go from there. So I'm going to double click on here to make it go full screen. Right now I have 16 gigs of RAM available to me, and I have basically 8 vCPUs. If you look at the, 4 vCPUs. So I basically have 8 gigahertz of CPU's capability. So I have 2 cores and two processors and 2 cores. So basically I have 4 logical processors. That's all I really need. So I'm actually going to right click here, and I'm going to go to new virtual machine. I could also click on this icon right here, and this would do the exact same thing. Or I could go to file and new virtual machine. There's like 10 ways to skin a cat here in this particular example. So I'm going to click on when you have the option here, typical and custom, you can be more specific. I'm going to go typical, but if you want to go custom, you'll notice on the left-hand side, you'll have more capabilities to map to a particular VM. We're not going to really play around with that right now. I'm just going to go typical. I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to call this Win 10. I'm going to click on next, and then it's going to ask me where I want to store the virtual machine files. So I'm going to choose Data Store 1, click next. And it's asking me what it is that I want to install. It is going to be a Windows operating system. From the drop down, I'm going to choose Windows 10 64-bit and click on Next. Then it's going to ask me what NIC do I want to map it to. Now, one thing that I will preface here initially is I don't want to actually use the data NIC. Data NIC, again, is a host-only vSwitch, meaning that we're not going to allow external connectivity to the internet. But the problem with that is anytime we're using an evaluation copy of Windows 10, Windows Server, whatever, we need to give it internet access so that it can call home and activate. If we don't do that, then our VM will only stay on for a period of time until the OS shuts down because we have violated the licensing agreement. So I'm actually going to hit the drop down and choose VM Network. This will allow it to have internet access. I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and it asks me how big of a hard drive do I want to give it. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to give it a 40 gig hard drive, but I'm going to thin provision it. Thin provisioning is actually pretty straightforward to understand. Let me go ahead and bust up my pen tool real quick just so you guys understand what it is that I mean by that. So thin provisioning simply means, there's actually 3 of them, and I'll cover all 3 relatively quickly. So if you take a storage, so these will be the 3 different storage options that are available to you. If you take thick provision lazy zeroed, if I take 40 gigs, I'll say that each one of these is a 40 gig chunk of storage. What thick provision lazy zeroed is going to do is it's going to go ahead and allocate all 40 gigs, but it's going to zero out all the portions of this out of the gate. But it's going to happen during the time frame that is used to create the hard drive and over a short period of time. And eventually you're going to see all 40 gigs used initially, so you'll all of the storage will be allocated to this VM and you won't be able to share it among other VMs. And it also means that the zeros are going to take up the entire space. So it's basically going to be the hard drive will look full, but it really won't be. It's basically a shadow fill. And then what's going to end up happening is over a period of time, you'll start to fill this with ones, which means data has been written to the storage, and it'll go along this way. And as data is filled, it's going to fill in these gaps as it goes. That's what lazy zeroed means. Thick provisioned eager zeroed means that you're going to allocate all 40 gigs initially, and then you're going to zero it out. It's going to be an aggressive zero. You're going to do it right away. This takes a little bit longer to provision because then you're saying, you know what, I want to do it immediately. And then as data is written, it's going to go ahead and fill it. Thin provision is the polar opposite of those two. You're going to allocate all 40 gigs, but instead of going out and zeroing everything, you're not going to zero it at all. All you're going to do is you're going to write data to the VM file structure, basically to chew up the 40 gig hard drive that's been allocated to it, only when data needs to be written. So this means here that this could be the cap. They'll say this is 15 gigs of data has been written. Now what that means is if I also go to thin provision here and thin provision here, that I could take a 40 gig hard drive and I could actually share it across multiple hosts. And that will allow me to give more flexibility in terms of resource allocation. It is an oversubscription model, so it is possible for this guy right here to be using 15%, and then this guy here uses, let's draw a line here, and let's say this guy's using 10% of the storage, and let's say this guy's using the other 25%, for example. If this guy needs to stretch down further because he's running out of storage space up here, let's say this is 90+% full or greater, and he needs to move down here, then that's going to bump into contention with this portion of the hard drive writing. So this is the only time this becomes bad, is with oversubscription. So this is only typically used when you are limited on your storage capabilities. We're not really limited here. I'm just giving you an example of how that would come into play. That's basically how this works. So that's what that's basically how it comes into play. I typically will go with the thin provision, and I'll just be mindful of how large and how many VMs I've got deployed, because it is very possible for you to allocate 1 terabyte of storage to, for example, a remote storage capability like iSCSI or Fiber Channel, and then you could oversubscribe all your VMs. Then you start to run into performance issues and things like that, and it becomes more and more difficult to work with. So it's one of those things where it's good and bad, but you have to make the decision as to when good and bad comes into play. So I often will say, yeah, go ahead and thin provision a VM that's going to be used for more or less a remote desktop connection for a teleworker, for example. But if you have a application or a workload that needs dedicated storage for whatever it's doing, and it can't be playing, footsie or, let's figure out who's doing what on the hard drive, and then you run into performance issues. If you have a high-performing workload, it makes more sense to go the thick provisioned, lazy, or eager zero, depending on the amount of IOPS of read-write that you need for your storage capability. So take those things into note when you're figuring out your storage plan. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen, and I'm going to move forward. Next, we have a summary of what we're going to be doing, and then we're going to go ahead and you'll notice that edit the virtual machine settings before completion. I'm actually going to check this, and I'm going to click on continue, and it's going to basically allow me to adjust the resources. Now this VM actually hasn't been pushed to the inventory yet, but I'm going to give this guy 8 gigs of RAM, and I'm going to give it, I'm going to actually get rid of the floppy drive. I don't need a floppy drive here. And I'm going to click on OK, so finish. So now the VM is being created, it's been created, and we're good to go. So I'm going to click in here on this and give it a second for it to refresh. I can go to edit settings, and I can come in here and I can make this changes. It says you have restricted editing capabilities of a virtual machine of version 9 or higher. Yeah, that's fine. Let's go ahead and click on OK. Anything that says restricted, you may not be able to make changes to. Not that big of a deal. Not really concerned about that at the moment. So we have 8 gigs of RAM. I'm actually going to drop this down to 6 gigs because it doesn't need that many. I wanted to show you you can manipulate it. And if I wanted to give it more CPUs, I could. So if I click on here, we have 2 sockets and we have 4 cores. So I can go give 1 virtual socket and 2 cores. So basically I'm giving this guy 2 virtual CPUs. I'm going to click on OK. Initially I like to do that just because of the fact that it gives me the ability of speeding up the process of the install. A few more processor cycles per operation is better. Click on OK. Now again, the thing that I need to go do now is click on Edit Settings one more time. Click on Do Not Show This Message Again. And I need to click on the CD DVD drive right here. I need to go to Data Store ISO file. Click on Browse, and then double click on Data Store ISO, or Data Store 1. Now you're going to notice Windows 10. I'm going to click on OK, and then I'm going to click on Connect at Power On. This means that it's going to cause the VM to load from the CD drive and not from the hard drive. We're trying to do a network-based Pixie boot. I'm going to click on OK. And then I'm going to click on this guy right here, the console button. The console is going to pop up, but it stays really small. I believe it's 800 by 600 is its resolution. I'm going to click on the Start menu and go from there. So what's going to end up happening here is momentarily this VM will go through its boot up process. So it should grab a, should start to, let me close this out. Maybe it didn't boot up right. Power it off real quick. Power off, and click yes. So I'm gonna click back on this. Let me just double check that the CD drive is pointed towards Windows 10. Okay, cool. Click OK there. Click on the console member one more time, and then press the play button. And what should happen, it might take a little bit longer than I'm willing to give it time for, and this is the boot option, so if you want to press any of these options to change the boot menu, you can. But what should happen is, there we go. That's what I was waiting for. So when you see the Windows logo show up momentarily, you should see at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see the loading screen, and it'll just take a little bit because of the amount of virtualization we're doing. So that's basically what we're waiting for right now. And you'll have to be patient with this because it is going to run slow. It won't be quick like a regular install will be on a dedicated server. So while that's, oh, there it goes. So when you see this starting up, that's a good sign. So that's that. Let me go, I'm going to pause the video until we get to some place where we can actually start to break down what's going on. Okay, so here we have the install features where we can choose all the details we want to use. I'm going to click on Next. And you'll notice that the look and feel, it might look a little choppy. That's because it is. The drivers set for the display are pretty bad right now. There's nothing really good about them. So when we go through the install process and we're completely finished with that, then we'll be able to upgrade that with VMware tools. And I'll show you how to do that in a separate video. So this is basically going to start the setup process. It will take a little bit of time to go through and get done. So for right now, we are in a hurry up and wait process, so I'm going to pause until this is further along. Alright, so if you don't have a product key, this is what you need to do, at least on the initial install. You press I don't have a product key, and it will bypass that process, and then you have to choose which version of the OS you want to install, and there's a bunch of them. Right now we're going to go to Windows 10 Pro. There are other editions of Windows 10 available, like Enterprise and things like that, but right now we're not going to really focus on that. But one of the things that I do have the intention of doing at some point in the future, sooner than later, is doing some Microsoft training, so just keep an eye out for that when it does come out. So I'll be covering those particular topics. So let's go ahead and click on Next. And if you're not sure what the N stands for, that's usually indicates that it's European version, so, and that's at least my experience. So I'm going to click on Next, and momentarily we should be able to go to the next step in the installation process. Again, this does take a little bit of time, so do be patient with it. So now we need to accept the license terms and click next. And we're going to choose install Windows only because this is not a new. This is a new install, not an upgrade. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to choose the 40 gig hard drive. I'm going to click on next, and now the install process will begin. So pretty straightforward stuff. This will take a while, so again, we're going to be hurry up and wait. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this guy and I'm going to minimize him, and we're going to jump over to Firefox onto ESXi 65-1. I'm going to click Login, and we're going to install Windows Server 2012 R2. Now, if we click over here on the CPU utilization, we can see that we're basically using 5% of the CPU for the install process. I do expect this to climb, probably double or if not triple its utilization, maybe even higher. But I usually keep that open so I can keep an eye on what's going on. But we do have lots of availability. We have 64 processes. We have 32 cores to set across here. So logical processors, I should say, is 32. All right. So what we're going to do is click on the virtual machines. And what we're going to do is we're going to register a VM. Now, create means you're going to build it from scratch. Register means you're going to ingest from some other location, like maybe you did a vMotion or you did an upload of some type. You can register a VM. I'm not really going to talk about that too much. I am going to say create one. So register an existing VM. So you already had one, you moved it around. There's a thing called Poor Man's Virtual vMotion where you can export and then import and stuff like that, but it's kind of tricky to get it working. So I'm going to click on next to create a new virtual machine. We're going to call this guy here Server 2012 R2. And I'm going to choose that the compatibility is 6.5. You can go down, but you can't go any higher than what you are currently at. So we can go down to 6.0, and what basically this is doing is it's basically going based off of the CPU capabilities. So there's a thing called EVC, Enhanced vMotion Capability, where you'll actually dumb down newer CPU capable processes and capabilities to older versions of ESXi, so you can vMotion from 6.0 to 6.5 and vice versa. So if you want to go from 6.5 to 6.0, we're not going to be doing that. We will eventually upgrade our 6.0 host to 6.5 and then 6.7. That's where I'm going to eventually get you guys to. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of getting there. But I'm going to choose 6.5 for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on select that. And then the OS family is going to be Windows. Select that. Select guest OS. That's weird. Let me cancel that process out real quick. Create register. Click next. Win 2012 R2, and there it goes. So Windows, and then we're going to select from the drop down. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom and select 2012 64-bit, and then click on next. How much storage we want to give it? Where we're going to be storing it. We're going to store it on the local data store. Click next, and then we're going to go through and it's going to ask us how we want to handle the VM hardware. Here we're going to configure it now versus later. Now I'm not a big fan of doing things in the megabytes portion of things, so I will choose the drop down, go to gigabyte, and I will turn this to 8 gigs because it's the server. And I'm going to expand that, and it says that the memory must be less than 4 terabytes. Obviously, that was just a warning for us. And if we come down here, we have the CD DVD drive. I'm going to come down to here and click on Data Store ISO file. It's automatically going to pop this data store browser up. I'm going to select this guy and then select it. And then I need to make sure that this checkbox right here is checked for connect. The other thing that I'm going to do is on the data network adapter, I'm going to drop down to VM network. Again, this is just for the VM's availability to hit the internet and register to get activated. Everything else we are good to go with. We don't have to do anything else besides that. What I would recommend we do is bump this up to 50 gigs of hard drive space. And then we're going to click on next. And then finish. And there we go. Now, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but if we click in here, and click in the VM itself, we do have the option of editing the settings. So we can click on edit. And I don't know if you noticed this or not, but give that a second to pull up and show what's happening. There is the ability of adding a network adapter. Let me go ahead and just, why is that there? You'll notice that the network adapter option is here. So you could add in another adapter and have like a direct VM to VM switch set up in the event that there's a dedicated database attached to the server, for example. But we're good to go where we are at. I'm going to click on save. Unfortunately, the client make. Let's go ahead and reload. This is unusual. So we're going to go ahead and click power on for this VM. It is now powered on. As you can see, it should start momentarily. And then what I'm going to do is on the console here, I'm going to say open console and new tab. So we'll actually see what's going on and we'll be able to interact with the VM directly and go from there. So that'll take a couple seconds to pull up. Because right now I haven't gone through and actually downloaded what they call the virtual machine remote console capability. I'll be doing that at a later point in time. So it's going to start booting up the process and we'll be able to interact with the VM this way through the web UI and stuff like that. So just be cognizant of things like that. So again, it's starting to spin. So I'll wait until we're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to go click on next and install now. And we are going to make sure that the setup is starting. And so that'll take a couple of minutes. Let's go double check our Windows 10 box. And we are 73% done. That's pretty good. It's moving faster than I expected to, which is awesome. So now we're at the hurry up and wait process. I'm going to pause until this one is a little further along, and then I'll bring you guys back in here momentarily. Literally hit the pause button and the pop-up happens. Love it when that happens. So we have a couple of different options available to us. Let me go ahead and scoot this option over just a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. And if you'll notice here, we have standard evaluation, server core, server with a GUI, DC evaluation, server core, DC evaluation with a GUI. And basically what these mean is server core simply means that it's going to be a lighter weight, a smaller footprint install, so it'll be command line only, where I'm not looking to do that. I want to do the standard eval with the GUI because this guy here needs a GUI. I'm going to click on next, and then we're going to accept the license agreement. Click next, and we're going to choose install Windows Advanced, and then the hard drive we gave it is 50 gigs. We're going to click on next, and that, ladies and gentlemen, means we are off to the races. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to minimize this, bring it off to the left, and scoot this side over here a little bit. As you can see, it's already starting to load up, which is a good sign for me. And I'm also going to bring up the Windows 10 version here real quick, just so we can have both of them side by side. And so this guy is going. So what I'll do is I will actually pause the video and I'll wait for both of these installs to be completed. And then once they are done, I will bring you guys back in. It should take a while for that to happen, but I'll do them one at a time. I'll show you how to do the VMware tools install on Windows 10 and the Windows Server, because this one will be done a lot faster than this one will. But I'll pause the video until we're ready to go. Alright, so our Windows 10 install looks to be pretty much done, and Windows 12, Server 2012 is right on its heels, as you can see. I'm going to click on yes. I'm in the United States, and we're just going to give it some basic information in order to finish this setup real quick. Windows 10 typically is a little bit slower to get installed. My keyboard setup is US. Yes, that is correct. Nope, I'm going to skip the secondary layout, and momentarily we should have connectivity. And it will, the network that this particular VM is attached to does not have a DHCP enabled, so I'm going to click on skip for now. I can always set that up later, which I plan on doing. And the name of this guy here is going to be admin, and I'm going to click on next. And the password is going to be any password you can come up with that meets the requirements. Click next, confirm that password, and then the password hint is going to be it's secret. Enter. And we should be in pretty good shape at this point. It shouldn't take too much longer to get through this process and get up and running. And we're going to say no, we do not want to enable Cortana, and accept this information, and that should be pretty much it. And Windows 10 will be okay. Perfect. That's what I was waiting for, was the high. So on the left side of your screen, you'll see that the Windows Server 2012 is on its way to get ready. So I'm going to pause until he is complete, and then I'll walk us through that final installation, and we'll be back here in just a moment. Alright, so we are at the insert your password portion. So I'm going to type in a password that meets the requirements, and we're going to click on finish, and then we'll be able to log in. As you can see, oh, the passwords didn't match apparently. Passwords don't match. Oh, how the heck did that happen? Okay. There we go. That should work. Okay, cool. All right. So while we wait for, we're in good shape at this point. So the installs are completed. So what we're going to go do is I'm going to go ahead and on this side here, I'm going to say goodbye to this. The drivers are really choppy, so just be cognizant of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the VMware or the VM option at the top of the screen. Go to guest and then install upgrade VMware tools. Yes, I want to do that. That's going to dramatically increase the viability of this host, and this VM, I should say. And do the exact same thing on this guy. So if you click on here, click here, right click. I'm sorry, if you click there and go to guest OS, and then come over here to VMware, install VMware tools. Click on that, and then if you also come in here to here, and you go to keyboard, what is it? Send keys and Control Delete. Then we'll be able to log in. somehow there we go. So come back over here and we click on the, it's a little tricky to get it to trigger, as you can see. Click on these file folder for File Explorer, and click on this PC, and then double click on VMware Tools. I have to go kind of slow because the experience is rather poor. So I'm going to click on yes, and then after a moment or so we should get the VMware Tools pop up, and then we'll be able to do the install process. On the left side of the screen we can see that our login was successful and we're in good shape. Alright, so if we come down here to this icon right here, it'll take a second, and then we're going to go ahead and click on next for the install. We're going to choose a typical install and install. We're going to let it do its thing, and then we're going to come over on the left side of the screen on here. We're going to go to the File Explorer, and we're going to, okay, VMware Tools did not check in the way that I wanted it to, so I'm going to click on this again, Guest OS, install VMware Tools, and then that should prompt the VMware Tools install process to kick off, and the DVD drive should be filled with the ISO for VMware Tools. We'll give that a moment or so to do its thing. In worst case scenario, we could always come back over here to this guy and log in, and we could force it to do it, but this should be all I need to do. It might just take a little bit of time. So if it says VMware Tools is not installed in this virtual machine, and it gives some specifics, so you can click on Actions here, and then you can go to Guest OS and select VMware Tools, and that should force it to, there it goes. Now that loaded it. So we're going to go ahead and double click to begin the install process. And as you can see on the other VM here, this guy is about to come back online, and we'll have a much better experience with it once VMware Tools is installed. But until that point, we're going to be kind of in a hurry up and wait type of process. And this one will take a little bit to get started. So I'm going to pause until we get a little further along, and then I'll bring you, oh, there it goes. Never mind. So it's flashing yellow, which means I need to click on it. We're going to click on next, typical install, and then install. And so we're at the hurry up and wait process. So that's where we are in terms of operations. I'm going to go ahead and pause until we are done with the reboots, and I'll bring you guys back in. Okay, well, for whatever reason, the Windows 10 VM console seems to have froze a little bit, so you can just close that out. Sometimes that happens. And then if you go back to ESXi6 and click on the console icon, this should pop up and refresh it. And oh, I remember that problem now. Once you install VMware Tools, it bugs out. All right, so I completely forgot about that. There's a black console window it gives you when you do Windows 10. So what I'm actually going to go do is the same process you use for Windows 10. I'm going to do Windows 10 Enterprise. So I'm going to blow this away, upload the ISO again, go through the install process, and get that guy squared away. And all the same steps that I went through work just fine here. I just chose a smaller file so the upload would be quicker. But it has come back to bite me in the butt. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Close this guy out, power this guy off, and yes. And then we're just going to go ahead and delete from disk, yes. And then on the data store ISO file, you would just simply upload the ISO you want. So I'm going to go ahead and let me go back to 65-1. Windows 10, and let me go ahead and pull this guy up real quick. And we have, this guy is ready to go now, so we can click in here and go Guest OS, send keys, VMware Tool, or Control Delete, and then we should be able to log in. and our experience should be much cleaner, and it was. So we're good to go there. Now it says Windows license is expired. IP addressing wise, it has not gotten an IP address, so it hasn't been able to check in with Microsoft's licensing servers. So I'm actually going to minimize this, right click here, and go open network and sharing. I'm going to give it an IP address. Let me just validate that the IP address I'm going to give it is going to work. So for example, you can click in here and ping, hit the up arrow, and type in ping.10.255.1.100. Make sure that IP address does not respond. And as long as it doesn't respond, we know we'll be in good shape. So I'm going to click on here, go to Properties, IPv4, Properties, and then make sure the numlock is on 10.255.1.100 /24 subnet mask. Default gateway of .1, and then the Google we're going to say is going to be our DNS server. Click on OK, close, and close again, and so we should have internet connectivity here in just a moment. We do, which is what we want, and we are squared away. So that's basically where we are at in terms of the operations. I'm going to stop the video here because of the fact that I need to do the other install. But now that I'm thinking about it, you guys have seen that process already happen. So I'm going to upload the correct ISO, get Windows 10 deployed, and then I'll bring you guys in the next video. I will show you how to validate the connectivity between them. It's actually very, very simple. But for right now, that's basically what I'm going to do. It'll take a little bit of time for that to happen. It'll be just a, let YouTube refresh, and boom, the next video pops up. You won't even notice a problem. Okay, until next time, guys, thanks so much for stopping by. We'll catch you guys in the next one.